On today's show, the San Diego Padres' good vibes continue as they sweep the Dodgers, granted in a 2-game set, and all of a sudden, is a division up for grabs? We're going to be recapping last night's game in which Dylan Cease's dominance continued. Luis Campusano Hive temporarily, potentially got off of life support, and looking at whether or not the Padres have the rotation that can win playoff games, Tatis' status, and a whole lot more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, August 1st. Man, July flew by. I am always, as always, your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You might be familiar with my other baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, where I'm currently writing about, just giving my own thoughts about the Padres trade deadline, and then also about Matt Waldron, and then also potentially some fun stuff down the line. And also you could check out my podcast there, Baseball versus the World. Evergreen, fun, silly baseball topics. Go check that out. And also, of course, as always, the best Twitter handle in the game if you want to keep up to date with what I've got on Padres stuff, at Javipeno, Javiipeno, and at LO_Padres for updates, mostly about the show. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And let me tell you, there's a lot of things that apply to today's episode, and most of them are good. Most of them are joyous. We are recapping last night's game and then answering a couple questions I think about the Padres going forward. And this has been like a really electric past few weeks for this team. It's been really, really fun. Yes, they had that bad stretch right before the All-Star break where all of a sudden they were only once again barely above 500. And then they've been just playing so well ever since. And then you had the trade deadline. I was outspoken about saying that I think that in a vacuum, I think that what they did was great. You got a lot of different relief options. That's awesome. You got Martin Perez, which at least maybe will be able to throw innings if needed. And them not acquiring a starting pitcher might have actually said, okay, a good thing about Darvish and Musgrove. Maybe they're viewing Darvish, Musgrove, Tatis as like their other trade deadline, quote unquote, acquisitions. And that's totally fine. They're not being cheap. Look at the Padres payroll. Look at all the things they've done. They're not a cheap team. They're not like those other teams in the league that just stand pat and just kick the can down the road. So I do think that the vibes are overall good, but I will say I don't love the prospect haul that they gave up. But for now, folks, I love this Padres team, man. Absolutely phenomenal win. Just kicked the crap out of the Dodgers, basically from the get-go. In this game, though, let's start first by talking about Dylan Cease. 5 2/3 going for 6 strikeouts, 3 walks, 3 hits, 1 earned run. It wasn't Cease's best start. Right? Like, that's not really any secret. It wasn't Cease's best start. It didn't feel like the Dodgers necessarily were able to hit him, which was a good sign. Instead, they were able to draw 3 walks, and they were able to prolong at-bats, which is why Cease didn't go far into this game. But that's to be expected with a team as good as the Dodgers, right? Like, this is what's going to happen. But even still, he had some really good moments, right? He had 11 whiffs on his slider in this game, 21 swings, 11 whiffs. So that thing was working big time. He actually threw the knuckle curve a little bit more than I'm used to from him and got some swings on that. But the big thing for me, I think the biggest moment from Cease's start is the strikeout against Will Smith, because after that strikeout, which I believe is, hold on, let me just make sure I get this right. In the top of the 3rd inning, that inning starts off with Nick Ahmed getting a single and then Shohei Ohtani getting a walk. So all of a sudden it's 1st and 2nd after the good vibes of the bottom of the 2nd inning, which we'll get into in a second. But you're hopefully that Dylan Cease doesn't blow it. We're feeling good about this game. The Padres have a 4-0 lead, and they really want this game because then all of a sudden they own the tiebreakers and all that against the Dodgers for the year. And I think that he gets that strikeout on Will Smith, 3 whiffs, a couple on his slider, just really, really impressive stuff for you to get 3 straight strikes after falling a little bit behind in the count, and getting 3 whiffs to get the strikeout on Will Smith, which ends up coming in handy because why? Because then after that, Gavin Lux, who is not nearly as prodigious a batter as a Shohei Ohtani, as a Will Smith, as your Freddie Freemans, all those type of guys, not nearly as good, and yet look at him go. He gets the double. And then, thankfully, Shohei Ohtani gets caught at home after a little bit of some sort of communication error. I don't know exactly what happened there. And then Machado flips the ball to Campusano, who's able to tag him out. So that strikeout was huge. And if he doesn't get that, if either Will Smith gets a hit or if he gets on base, this game could have been a lot different. And Dylan Cease might even be one, if you're like me, who just thinks that people are due at some point for a poor start, that might have been the case here. But for Dylan Cease, he has just not been showing that he's going to have any bad start for a while now. And I think that we talked about recently on the pod how there was some report that someone, I forgot which one of you commented this, that said that on TV they mentioned that Cease had made some adjustments because apparently he was maybe tipping his pitches a little bit, and that might explain why he had a bad stretch. But let me tell you, basically for a while now, since the July 7th start against Arizona, in which he got 8 strikeouts over 7 innings, gave up 3 earned runs. And if you guys forget, it was 2 home runs he gave up, so he really only made 2 mistakes. After that, 6 innings, only 1 hit against the Braves, one of his best starts of the entire season, 11 strikeouts, 7 innings against the Guardians, only 1 hit allowed, 10 strikeouts, no runs. Then, of course, against the lovely, lovely Washington Nationals. Man, we disrespected the heck out of the Nationals after what they did to Profar. Isn't it beautiful? I know we talked about it before, but I just got to bring it up again. And then, of course, he gets the no-hitter and then follows it up with a solid, not great, not even pretty good, but solid, okay start for Dylan Cease. And this is the dream of this Padres team right here. This is the dream. That if your Dylan Cease has a start, he's not able to go super deep into the game, which is fine, especially when you start going up against the better teams. What you got to see is the beauty of having a better bullpen and the fact that you can start off with an Adrian Morejon now instead of having to save him for later because you don't trust Santos, because you don't trust Matsui, because you don't trust Kolek. Instead, they go to Morejon, he gets the strikeout to end that, only gets 1 out, and then Alec Jacob, who is one of the prospects that the Padres have had that has some interesting, exciting stuff. And you got to see that here. Goes clean, 1 inning, 3 strikeouts. After that, Jason Adam comes in. Boom. No strikeouts, no hits, no walks, but he gets through everything. His Padres debut, does not give up any runs. And then they bring in Brian Hoeing. He goes an inning, gets a strikeout, nothing else. It is really, really good that this Padres team, this is the beauty of having good bullpen, is that I think the Padres and Preller might have decided, you know what, instead of paying a lot for the starter, and maybe we don't know exactly, I mean, hey, the Dodgers did give up apparently like one of their top 3 prospects for Jack Flaherty, who thankfully the Padres didn't have to face this series. But maybe they decided, let's get some bullpen help and reinforcements because we think that Darvish and Musgrove are coming back. At least that's what I think the calculus is. And if that's true, then you got to see this is the ideal winning scenario for the Padres. You got a couple aces, right? You've got Dylan Cease, Michael King's a fringe ace, you got Matt Waldron, you got Musgrove and Darvish, hopefully, all that stuff. If they can just be okay with this offense, this is the type of stuff that you could get happening. And it is really, really impressive. And again, Dylan Cease cannot thank him enough after a really, really rough stretch in, what was it, June? Was it June? Was June the bad month? I'm kind of forgetting now almost. June and July really blended together. I don't know about you guys. But in June, he had a 4.94 ERA. In July, 2.48. Amazing, amazing turnaround for Dylan Cease. After having a little bit of a bad stretch on the season, he looks amazing. And while he isn't going to get many Cy Young votes, he might get a couple, right? This is a guy who's just been super consistent for a while. Even those years where his ERA was a little bit bloated, and the fact that he was on a very bad White Sox team with a bad defense, let's ignore that for a second. He's always been a guy that's still able to give you a lot of innings, give you a lot of strikeouts. And yes, he's not necessarily a shutdown, lock it in, he's going 7 and he's getting 11 Ks. Most starters aren't that. Garrett Cole is the probably best starting pitcher in baseball overall. And it's not like he goes dominant 8 innings, 15 strikeouts all the time. Instead, it's just that he's always available and he's always solid to great. He's never he's always good. And I think that's the big thing that everybody needs to be reminded of, is that Cease is not going to be a guy who's Jacob deGrom untouchable for the whole year. That's not what constitutes an ace. An ace isn't someone who acts like an ace all the time. And Dylan Cease has shown you that he's amazing, and most importantly, his control. I think that's what Ruben Niebla deserves credit for, is that he's never had a walk rate below 9%, and this year it's at 7.7%. And more often than not, his walk rate has exceeded 10%. So just that little part alone, I think, has made the difference for Cease this year, the fact that he is not letting up any free passes, at least not as he usually does. So amazing stuff from Dylan Cease, but of course, that's not it, ladies and gentlemen. That's not it. But let me tell you, man, it was beautiful. Padres bullpen, 0 earned runs over these 2 games. Can you believe that? Isn't that amazing? That's pretty great. We're going to talk about the Padres offense, though, guys, in just a second, because I actually think that there was some really fun moments in this game. because you know I love talking about Luis Campusano. But before we do that, I need to take a second to talk to you fine folks at home about the legendary, the immaculate Supply House. Y'all know about Supply House. We've been talking about them for a while, and they are here for you. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Plumbing, HVAC, electrical, whatever it is, they are the website to go to, and it's easy to use with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. And if you need help with an order, don't worry, you can get industry-leading expert advice from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can also get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM if that applies to you, and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Supply House, baby. Go check it out. But that's not all, guys. I want to take a second to talk to you about a new sponsor, and that is the good old friends over at Liquid IV. Look, here's the thing, man. You don't want everything to be cold. It's the summer. What can I say? You want to have your little ice cream. You want to have your cold treats. When you're talking about baseball, when you're talking about America's pastime, don't forget to be hydrated when you're out there in those ball games with Liquid IV's popsicle firecracker flavor, a surefire summer hit. A little bit of a Freudian slip there. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, because baseball and summer go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. It's really great. Blast off with a bunch of different play flavors: popsicle firecracker, a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon, lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. And you can find all of your flavors: pina colada, lemon lime, all sorts of stuff that they've got over there. And what I love is you just tear, you one stick, 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone, powered by LIV Hydra Science, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. So really, you just rip the thing off and you pour the bad boy in and you're ready to go. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. And because you're listening to this show, you know I don't leave you guys hanging. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today and use the promo code MLB. Remember, MLB at liquidiv.com. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing back into segment number 2 of this whole podcast. Let's talk about the Padres offense in this one. Absolutely blowing up. And I will say, a little bit of an error on our little Dodger friends, the people who run everything. 3 errors in this game from the Dodgers, and it starts early in this game for the Padres. In the bottom of the second inning, that's when everything goes absolutely off the rails. A single from Jackson Merrill, and then a Ha-Seong Kim walk, and then the madness begins. In a 3-2 count, this was a big opportunity for Luis Campusano, who we've been critical of. I still love being one of the starters of the Hive, of course. But Campusano, of course, is not good as Kyle Higashioka. We've broken this down before, but he's still a guy that it's cool that the Padres, hopefully, if they figure out maybe some adjustments, if they figure out maybe some matchups, if they figure out maybe Campusano's better against certain pitchers than not, you might have a little bit of an interesting tandem going on here. Campusano does drive in 1 with his single, which was great. Bryce Johnson then reaches on a fielder's choice. Luis Campusano to second. Ha-Seong Kim scores, and boy, do we love it, because Mr. Clayton Kershaw, unable to handle the ball after it is bunted by Bryce Johnson. It's amazing stuff. First of all, love the squeeze bunt attempt there, actually. I don't know why. It was just totally random, and I kind of liked it. But especially for a guy like Bryce Johnson, who's been basically just a little bit of a black hole offensively for this team, which is why they desperately need what's his face back What's the dude's name? Oh yeah, Fernando Tatis Jr. By the way, update on him. I haven't heard anything new. Some people have DM'd me about this. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but it seems like they're, going to be running some MRIs and stuff. They're going to be slowly ramping up his baseball activity, but it's still murky. We don't know for sure. I'm hoping that them not going for any bat, your Taylor Wards, your Jesse Winkers, whatever, that tells me that they're optimistic about it. But even if they're not, Padres scored 8 runs in this game, so it's showing you that they're very confident that this offense can be good, and it's more of a, we just want Tatis back at some point, rather than we need him back now. And I think that that's a sign of a good team with a lot more depth than we're used to. But anyway, Luis Ariz then gets a sacrifice ground out. Then Jurickson Profar, of course, gets a single. Gavin Lux, obviously, we talked about that before. And then the final kind of a dagger in Clayton Kershaw's night. Luis Campusano hits a home run. Jurickson Profar gets another RBI single. Xander Bogarts gets a sac fly. And just for good measure, at the end of the game, Jackson Merrill hits a double in the bottom of the 7th inning that bounces right off the wall, or like the edge of the wall. That's one thing that's always been funny about Petco to me, is their outfield. What's that called? Like the stadium... I don't know what that's called exactly. Like the edge right before it's out. Like it's just more flat. I see people like they'll put their drinks on there. It's like a giant table almost. And it unfortunately is ruled just a ground rule double, but he still drives one in. I would have liked it just because it would have been fun if Jackson Merrill got a home run. But of course, not all that much mattered there. Ha-Seong Kim draws a walk. Unfortunately, he was so close to having a God game, but Luis Campusano grabbed it to a double play. Frankly, just for my sake and me being able to record early, part of me was like, that's the consolation. I can't hype the Campusano Hive as much, but at least it means this game will probably go by a little bit faster. All in all, though, another one-hit game from Luis Ariz. We're still waiting for him to get, catch on fire. 2 hits for Jurickson Profar. Xander Bogarts gets an RBI double in this game. Manny Machado 2 for 5. No RBIs, just 2 singles. And that's basically it. Jackson Merrill 2 for 4, 2 for 4 night from Luis Campusano, 2 for 3, from our guy Bryce Johnson with a walk. So just all in all, really great team effort performance by the Padres here. And that's what I really love. And here's the thing. Talked about the bullpen a lot, all that stuff. I want to also mention, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on previous shows, Xander Bogarts looks engaged. And I'm not saying he wasn't before, but it's a lot more noticeable as someone who's just watching the games at home, right? He just looks a lot more activated, a lot more animated, including when he occasionally messes up, right? Even when he messes up, he just looks a lot more fiery and everything. Maybe because, he's been healed, he got to spend some time on the IL. Maybe that was good for him. I don't know. Maybe he went on vacation or whatever, his own version of vacation, whatever that is, athletes, they get no days off, I guess. But that's just what I've been seeing lately. And I saw that not just in this game, but in previous games. He just looks a little bit, I don't know. I would love to hear what you guys think, just based on, and again, I don't like to read too much into body language, but that's just an observation. And I'm wondering if everybody feels the same. He looks a little bit more animated than usual. So that's a good sign. And it's been a really good sign that he's just hitting well, right? And he gets a double in this game, obviously, but he's been really good. Cannot complain about Xander Bogarts. And I think that I'm going to talk a little bit of smack, because why not, folks? This was the classic microcosm of the Dodgers, man. Big games, they make a bunch of mistakes, and what is more classic than Clayton Kershaw, having a bad start? Now, I understand that he just got back, and this is not, the Clayton Kershaw of old. He's only made 2 starts. His last start, he only went 4 innings against the Giants. Like, he's going to be a guy for them that can, do stuff, but he's clearly not going to be all that effective anymore, right? And it's nice to see that the Padres torched him up. And what was very Kershaw wasn't him giving up the runs. It was that error at home plate, not able to hold on to the ball on the squeeze bunt. So, just classic microcosm of the Dodgers. This is why nobody's scared of them when it comes to the big games, right? Big game mistakes. And by the way, this game really does matter because, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, all of a sudden they own the tiebreaker. They're going to be 3.5 games back. Is the division a possibility? It might be, right? So all of a sudden, when the games matter most, this is why no one's scared of the Dodgers come playoff time. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys managed to win in the shortened season. I don't care. No one's afraid of you. Now, there are teams I'm afraid of, right? I think Philadelphia, unfortunately kind of owns the Padres, but this year we've been that version of it, and we're doing it to the Dodgers, and it was great stuff. Another thing that I thought was interesting is, once again, the Dodgers stench has affected another all-time player. It affected Mookie Betts. He's been bad in the playoffs for this team for a while, and it's affected Shohei Ohtani from Al Scott on Twitter. If you're on Padres Twitter, you know him. Shohei Ohtani is 12 for 64, which is a 188 average in his career against the San Diego Padres. Beautiful. Tell me, they ruin everyone, man. Once you go to LA, it's like they suck out your personality, your aura. You know what I mean? Not personality's not true. They're not the Yankees. The Yankees suck out your personality. But they just suck out like kind of the legendary factor. You just become another cog in the Dodger machine. And Mookie Betts is great. They're still great players. And it's worth noting that Mookie Betts was not available. It's also worth noting that the Dodgers are a little bit beat up right now. Now, I'm not going to feel that bad because this is the same fan base that has been talking crap about that playoff series win in 2020 when our top two starters were out for like years. So I'm not going to feel bad for the Dodgers fans, but it is true. Chris Taylor's on IL. Tommy Edman, who they just acquired, is on IL. Mookie Betts, obviously. Tony Gonsolin. And is Freddie? I'm pretty sure Freddie's on the IL, right? Where is he? I can't even find him on the depth chart. That's very odd. But anyway, he was not available in this either. Walker Buehler didn't come back. I understand that this Dodgers team isn't as healthy as it usually is, but I don't care. Win's a win, and all of a sudden is the Dodgers. Their reign of terror over. I'm going to talk about that, guys, in just a second, as well as answering a listener question, a couple listener questions, actually. But first, I need to take a second, you guys, to talk about one of our favorite classic sponsors. That is the good folks over at Game Time. Here's the thing, folks. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And get this, prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer you get to that first pitch. So here's the thing. If you don't realize that you're going to be free a certain day or whatever, and you're like, oh, wow, that ended sooner than I thought, and you want to go catch a ball game, don't worry. Game Time's there for you because they've got all sorts of deals, flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or an event. They've got zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. All-in pricing allows you to toggle, shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can see the seat views, a little panoramic view when you're clicking on it, just have an idea of what it looks like, especially if you're not familiar with the ballpark you're going to. That's really helpful. Lowest prices guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And here's the thing, it's not just baseball, it's not just NBA, it's not just NFL, it's not just WNBA, it's not just NHL, whatever it is. They also got you with theater tickets, they've got comedy, they've got concerts. Game Time is here for you when it comes to tickets, man. They've got all the stuff. So what are you waiting for, guys? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Game Time. Go check it out. And just like that, folks, we are thriving and most certainly vibing back here into the Locked On Padres podcast. We were just talking about, the good vibes ahead of all of this. All right, here's the thing. All of a sudden, I have a question for you guys. Could it be that the Padres may be within range to win the division? Because all of a sudden, they're right behind them, man. The Dodgers have 63 wins on the season, and the Padres keep on winning. So it's not impossible. In terms of the overall playoff picture, again, and by the way, what I'm about to read to you here is why I was a little bit more critical of the deadline for you to give up that many assets. And it's not like this team has 72 wins or 65 in the case of Phillies, which are the best team in the National League. And that it's some sort of lock that they make the playoffs. That's part of the reason I was critical. But right now, the 3 wildcard spots belong to the Braves with 58 wins, the Padres with 59 wins, the Diamondbacks with 58 wins. And then right behind that, the Mets have 57, they're only a half game back. The Cardinals, they've got 56. They're only 1.5 game back. The Pirates even, they're 2.5 games back. And then the Giants are a little interesting. They are 4.5 games back. They're only a little bit interesting because they are potentially getting some reinforcements down the line. Snell is going to be on fire. I don't really know what they were thinking not trading Snell. I'm not that worried about the Giants. I'm just saying as a team, when we face them, could be a little bit better, right? That could be a type of series. They could play spoiler, right? But I don't see them as much of a playoff threat. And frankly, I don't know why they didn't trade Snell at the deadline. He's going to shove for the rest of the season, and then you're going to lose him in free agency because he's going to opt out and test the market again and get another deal. So I don't know what the Giants are doing, but I'll take it. Keep being silly over there. No one knows what you guys want, and I appreciate that very much, as many Padres fans do. But I think it's absolutely possible. And if you're one of those people like me who takes a little bit of a more empirical, a little bit stat-heavy approach, if you're just someone who's like, hey, it's got to happen at some point, then maybe this is the year. And maybe it's the year that we didn't even talk about it, right? That's the funny thing about sports, is when you're waiting for something to happen, it's often not from the team that you expect it's going to happen for, right? So for example, I talk about this a lot with the 2001 Mariners. Whoever breaks that team's record is not going to be the team with the 500 million payroll who's expected to win the games. It's going to be a pretty good team on paper that everyone just peaks in order to break that record, right? That seems to be what happens. And this year, I don't think anyone was talking about the Dodgers losing that division. I think last year they talked about it. I think the year before they talked about it. This year they definitely did. I mean, they added Shohei Ohtani. They added Walker Buehler, or they were getting Walker Buehler back. They added Tyler Glasnow. They had Bobby Miller. They added Shohei Ohtani, right? They added Teoscar Hernandez. They added all these different players. So you figured, okay, division is theirs. Playoffs, we'll see. But maybe. So keep an eye on those Dodgers games more than usual, because it's not impossible that they win the division. At some point, they can't win the division, right? It's been like 15 straight years. At some point, you can't. And if that happens, oh baby, I'll do a naked mile on this podcast. Not literally, because I get fired and that would be bad. But you get my point. Like, I'm going to be really jazzed if that happens. And I don't think it's that crazy, especially with what I was just talking about, which is the Dodgers are kind of banged up right now. They're still an elite team, but they're pretty banged up with some of these injuries. And I don't necessarily know if it's going to get a lot better, at least a lot better this season. So keep an eye on that. But there's more, guys. I also want to talk to you about 2 more things. All right. I got a variation of this question from a lot of you, and that is, do the Padres have what it takes to win in terms of their rotation? Is their rotation good enough? And frankly, I think this question's simple. Absolutely. Here's the thing. I think that you need pitching to win the playoffs. I do. Because I think that you see oftentimes that offense can be a little bit more fluky. And frankly, you see that just pretty good players can blow up in the offseason. And fun fact, the people who have won the MVP these past few years in the playoffs have for some reason not been very good. And that's not an indictment on them. It's weird. Like, there's plenty of guys who are the best in the sport that just go through a dry spell when they hit the playoffs. And then David Freese, famously of the Cardinals, becomes a playoff legend. Or Randy Arozarena, you know what I mean? Big game Randy. He breaks all the playoff records a few years ago. But I think that if you just have guys who you know are going to be solid, that's what you need offensively. When it comes to the pitching rotation, I feel like you just look back at last year. You don't need, and I know some people might be thinking this, can the Padres really win with Cease, King, and Waldron? Absolutely. Because first of all, if you can just get one of Darvish or Musgrove back and being effective, that's all you're going to need, because then the 5th spot, that ain't going to matter nearly as much come a playoff game. If they have to, they can start Motorhorn and they can make it a bullpen ordeal, especially with this bullpen. It won't be a crazy idea. Maybe you start Randy Vasquez. He goes 2 innings. You could do that, right? Like, you see what I'm saying? You can do that. In my opinion, you need like one super like ace who can go up against their best pitcher and be just as good and cancel it out. After that, you need a little bit of a fringe ace and just a solid guy. And here's the thing. I don't think you need the 80s Braves, or what was that team? What was the team with like Sandy Koufax and all those guys and John Smoltz? What was that Braves team? I'm going to look it up right now, actually. Was it Braves? Who the heck was it? I'm trying to think of who it was. But you know what I'm talking about. The Braves team that had like 3 Hall of Famers in their rotation. That's not what it takes to win a World Series, right? That is absolutely not what you need in order to win a World Series. And I do think that overall, the Padres have enough. Yeah, they had Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz. Yeah, okay, so there we go. That's who it was. But back to my original point. I think that the Padres rotation is absolutely what it takes. And if you look at last year, look at who won the World Series last year. Obviously, the Rangers, they're big game, big time paid players. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't spend money and that can win you a World Series. Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia, Marcus Semien, those guys really showed up. And then they got some help from their prospects too. But their rotation wasn't exactly like electric last year, right? Their rotation was solid. They had a Nate Eovaldi, they had a John Gray, and then the big hero of the playoffs, Jordan Montgomery. Jordan Montgomery isn't even a top 20 starter in Major League Baseball. Maybe top 25, occasionally top 30, but he's just a solid pitcher. I think Matt Waldron is the type of guy, would it shock you if he can go on a stretch where he hits really good in the playoffs and maybe gives you 5 innings, only gives up a run? That wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't shock me whatsoever. Would not shock me whatsoever. So everybody, I think you need to calm down. I'm not speaking to any of you. I don't mean that to sound like an attack. I'm just saying the rotation is needed, but I don't think you need 3 aces to win the World Series. I just really don't do that. Look at the rotation last year. They had Andrew Heaney going in games, Martin Perez going in big games, Jordan Montgomery. And yeah, I understand that they had Scherzer for a couple games, but even still, it's not like Scherzer was, peak Max Scherzer. I think this rotation is more than enough to win the World Series, or at least win playoff series, I should say. It's good. You've got Cease. King is fringe, almost an ace caliber guy. And then Matt Waldron, and then one of Musgrove Darvish. That's absolutely good. I would like if both of those guys could come back, it'd be awesome, and we could have a little bit more faith in them. But if those guys come back, if they don't, then maybe we can talk about it. Because then all of a sudden you're basically demanding that Cease and King are great, because you don't know exactly how Matt Waldron's going to fare against some of the best bats in the league. But overall, I absolutely think that this rotation is ready for it. Just depends on the health of those guys. And then, of course, another question. We got this one from one of my YouTube shorts, I believe, and this comment comes from Mr. Phoenix Ash 927. Question: how many games and how deep do the Padres need to go for AJ to keep his job? I love our team, especially once we figure out our 5th starter. Amazing bullpen. Emptying the farm system outside the untouchables says that there 100% is a number AJ has to hit. Great question, Phoenix. I think if they make the playoffs, I think a wild card loss would be bad. New ownership can be weird sometimes. I think they definitely need to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs, he's gone. I stand by that. I would put money on it. If they make the playoffs and they were to lose in a wild card series, right? Pretend for a second that happens. Let's pretend they don't win the division, that dream that I was having before. If you lose in a wild card series, I could see that because you gave up a lot of assets. I think they need to make a little bit of a playoff run. Playoffs is a must. And then obviously, if it's a wild card series, whatever it is, I think they need to win that. I really do. I think they need to go far. I don't think it's World Series or bust. That would be crazy for anybody. But I think they need to do that. And I think, Phoenix, as you mentioned, the moves that they made tell me, yes, Preller needs to make the playoffs. And honestly, I bet you other GMs took advantage of that. I understand that there was a lot of crazy prices for a lot of relievers and even average starters like your Yusei Kikuchi. I know I brought that up a lot, but I really can't believe that they got Lo Perfido in that deal. So shouts to the Jays making off pretty decent at the deadline. I don't know, man. I think that GMs might have been like, oh, he might be really on the hot seat and he's crazy and he's ready to give up anything. So let's ask for their top intro. Okay, there we go. For a rental closer, we'll absolutely take it. So I do think that Preller is absolutely on the hot seat and needs this team to make a bit of a run. I think if they made the NLCS, for example, he's safe. I think if they win a division series, they'd be safe, but they need to be impressive. You can't go into the playoffs and be bad. Otherwise, I think there could be a situation, especially with the new ownership group and new faces and new people in charge, in which AJ Preller is dismissed. But that's a great question. And I think, frankly, that we've known that for a while. I really do. I think that the weirdness of everything with Bob Melvin, all those reports, new ownership, everything, Seidler was, rest in peace, his greatest defender, it seems, by multiple reports. I think this is it, man. I really, really do. And I'm conflicted, right? Because part of me is I hate how many weird, in the moment decisions AJ Preller makes, but also how many teams can you think of that have made more big time, heavy, big, sexy name trades than the Padres and then are still able to potentially make them the next year? He's an amazing talent evaluator. So it's one of those things where if you do get rid of AJ, do you trust that they'll be able to find someone with as good as an acumen for talent and being able to draft those high school kids with high upside that are able to then be shipped to other teams for their starting caliber players? I don't know. frankly, you could also go to the other direction and say, hey, one person doesn't make the show. Maybe it's a bunch of people around Preller that are also doing a good job helping us discover and identify the best talent to build a better farm. I don't know, but that's just my opinion. What's yours, guys? That about does it, though, for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Last note, tomorrow, we're going to be doing a crossover with Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies, talk a little bit about the NL West as a whole, talk about what the heck is going on with that Rockies organization, and also I'm trying to, for future reference, for the late games, so for the games that are on the East Coast that start at like 9:45, 9:30, I kind of want to try going live after the game. So keep it locked on the YouTube. I think I'm going to do that for the late games, not the early ones, but the late games. I might want to do that. And then maybe you guys can just chip in. You can jump in chat. You can ask me any of the questions you want. Frankly, you can ask me questions about anything. I don't care if you're like, hey, what's your favorite season of Cobra Kai? I don't care. Hey, have you watched The Bear? I don't care. You can ask me about anything. Hey, what's your favorite DS game? Whatever. But also, definitely try to keep it baseball. But I think I want to do that. I want to be more interacting with you guys. I want to do a little bit more live shows instead of just little YouTube shorts and whatnot when big news happens. So looking forward to that. Stay tuned when it is a late game. I'm going to try and go live right after the game, hopefully, and just mix it up a little bit as we head into this final stretch. But, of course, with all that being said, until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, take care.